Hi, this is Dan Rasmussen with Serious Insights, and I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this webinar, Collaboration in a Time of Quarantine. As I've been working with my startup clients and with enterprise clients, I've noticed that collaboration technology is being used more than ever before, but it's also not being used as effectively as possible. So I thought I would take a moment to go over a few basic principles, because as we've moved to software as a service and it's become much easier to acquire technology, in particular collaboration technology, it's literally everywhere and in everything, we have really fragmented the way that we work rather than creating a more holistic and comprehensive, inclusive platform for our workers. So I'm going to take you through a few slides and hopefully give you a sense of how you can improve your collaboration environment and help your workers be both more productive and more effective. Today we're going to talk about where we are today with the COVID-19 and the coronavirus issues and what that has done to the collaboration market through a small lens. And then I'm going to talk about the decisions that companies need to make, the decisions that you as an enterprise need to think about as you roll software out to people who are working remotely. And then what workers need to do to take control of their own environments, because not everything is going to be a choice made for you by an enterprise. You have to think about how you're going to work, where you're going to work, and what that environment looks like. And finally, introduce you to a little bit of our collaboration coaching offerings. Start off with where we are today. Where we are today was actually kind of started on March 19th. We started seeing the announcements from Microsoft and Slack and others about the great increase in the number of users, and we've seen that continue. Microsoft has been the most vocal in terms of sharing its information, and so we went to 44 million daily users on March 19th. Effectively at the end of April, they were at 75 million active users. So we've seen great growth. We've also seen a few hiccups here and there. We've seen Zoom security issues. We've seen Teams performance issues occasionally. But for the most part, the collaboration technology has held its own and continued to be effective and support this huge increase in the number of people who are using it. So everybody is now familiar with some kind of collaboration technology. It used to be everybody was familiar with email, and now you are likely familiar with a Teams or a Zoom or a Slack or something of those kinds, and we'll talk about that a bit in a moment. So again, there's some decisions that organizations have to make. So I'm talking now, this first slide is for IT people and for lines of business managers who have to think about what's the technology that we're putting in and what are the processes and practices that we're putting in place to help manage both the technology itself as well as the work that's being done by workers. So preparing your teams for remote work, deciding which tools to use. There are literally dozens and dozens of collaboration technologies. If you allow people to choose for themselves, you will end up with fragmented work. You will end up with time being spent deciding where I do something versus where I don't do something, or what this project is requiring versus what another project is requiring. So you need to help people decide, in the context of a particular piece of work, what's the right set of tools for that. And you want to simplify as much as possible. I've been in startups recently that had Facebook for work. I've been in the same place. They've had Slack, they've had Jira, they've had Microsoft Teams. So all of that, and it's if I'm working on this project, am I working in Teams? Do I post something over here in Facebook? What happens on Slack? Why do I need all of these different accounts, and what are they for? Who are the audiences? And quite frankly, I've never had any training associated with that or introduction. I ended up getting a series of onboarding messages from the IT department saying, here's your new Slack ID, here's your new Jira ID, here's your new Facebook ID, here's your new sign-on for Teams. And there was really no governance in terms of what's the technology that's used for which project. So really think about that. And if you can, simplify. Don't take that decision away. I don't have to think about it if I don't have a Facebook or I don't have a Slack and I'm using Teams or vice versa. I don't have to think about that. I know that all of my work is being done in one place. And then also adopt automated scheduling. So I use, for instance, X.AI as a scheduling tool. There are several others out there that allow you to manage your calendar without you looking at all of your time slots and manually negotiating that. So I think that's a tool that may not be part of a suite that you already have, and it may be something you want to add on. And so we have technology, and then we have practice. And practice are things that are policies that have been codified, and they may not even be codified. They may still be advisories or verbal. But think about these practices that you master your collaboration apps. Over and over and over. I see people who are unfamiliar with the technology and therefore not using it as effectively as they could. So where you can, offer training courses, point people to videos. Most importantly, give them time to manage the technology on their own. To give them the time and the permission to go out and learn how to use the tools. Converge on virtual escalation and conflict resolution approaches. How do you think about a problem that occurs where you can't just go to the manager and say, let's close the door and haggle this out in your office, or for two people to do that for that matter? How do you resolve a problem? And that's something that I think every organization has to work through very early in their collaboration efforts. You also have to think about the key performance indicators. I cannot emphasize this enough, that very often kind of the I can see you working gives people a sense of comfort and may even contribute to the perception that they're a superior performer. Every time I go in, the person's busy, their head down, their computer's open, there's files all over their desk. I know they're being productive. May or may not be true, but the perception is that that's the work. If you're remote and your workers are remote, you can't see that. You can see that they're online, they may be active, they may be contributing, but you really need to start thinking about what the outcomes are. What is the time that a particular piece of work has to be done in? What is its due date? What is the set of criteria for evaluating if that is a good piece of work, if it is successfully completed, and really start managing to outcome production versus busyness, because that's really the only way you can do it in a remote work environment. And also make sure that you advise people on security, that you understand that there are a wide range of Wi-Fi and connected systems out there that people are going to be working on, and that you've done the most you can to help coach them on how to use their personal equipment and also how to effectively use their work equipment if they have assigned equipment that they've taken home with them, on what security needs to be, what the firewalls need to be, how virus and malware and other things need to be managed, how often those need to be run, if it's scripted, and giving them a sense of this thing's going to run in the background once a week or once every day or once every hour or whatever that may be for you. And that's something that you need to concentrate on. And then finally, on processes, select which tools support which process. And so again, making it clear to people that when I'm doing accounts payable and I have a question about an invoice, am I using email? Am I sticking something in a Slack channel? Am I writing something in a Teams channel? Where is that happening? And then also rethinking rewards in a time of heavily remote work. How do you think about rewarding good collaboration? Because you may not even recognize it early on, and it's something that, here now a couple months into this, you're probably starting to see the people who are really effective at doing this, and you want to catch them, as they said in the old 1 minute manager, you want to catch them doing something right and reward them right then, but also share that with the team and talk to people about how the person did it right and the kinds of behaviors that you're seeing that are effective in this work environment. And also keep in mind from the enterprise standpoint that this is not about you and your employees. This is a much broader conversation. Many of you have contract workers, and yes, some of the contract workers may have been some of the first to be furloughed or laid off, but you probably still have contract workers. You probably still have supply chain or creative partners. You probably still have suppliers. You certainly have customers, and you have employees. All of those are touch points for collaboration. Is it just an email? Are you inviting external people into a team? Are you giving people access to Slack channels? How are you managing these various communities? And you have to actively do that, and ideally consistently do that, so that you have a way of understanding how to manage and govern the technology side, the security pieces, as well as the effectiveness of the technology itself, and that the people you're inviting into these places know how to use it and what to do with it. And that you're also making your employees aware of those choices so that they know where to contact the various audiences. All right, now I'm going to switch to you as a worker. And what do you need to know? Well, first, you need to work with your organization, and some of these have names, some of them are just icons. I'm not going to go over all of the icons. I'm just making a point here that there are a lot of technologies out there that are collaboration oriented, from things that do webinars, things that do online meetings, things that do project tracking, thread management, all kinds of stuff. And I'll show you a deeper view of that in 1 second. But you have to make the choice of what are the tools that we're using. And if we are going to use those tools, how are we using them effectively in order to do the remote work in the best way we can. So in the days before software as a service and the access to technology over credit cards, and of course there's still enterprise deals that are cut, and there's still RFPs and RFQs that are written, a lot of organizations sat down, because I worked in the middle of many of those and consulted with several that were doing it, wrote down how are we going to work? What are the features of a collaboration environment? What is a collaboration environment to us? I think many organizations, especially middle to smaller ones, have really abandoned that. And they end up getting too many things because they haven't thought through what are all the features that we have and where are the feature overlaps. So I thought I'd do a graphic, and I'm going to share this graphic separately from this presentation so you don't have to screen capture it as we go through, and to give you a sense of what the features are that you need to start thinking about. Let me just start with the first set of areas, which are meetings. So there are asynchronous meetings, which are held in threaded discussions and have persistent chat. And then there are all kinds of other meetings: audio conferences, group chat, VR meetings, virtual whiteboards, video conferencing. And those are, again, all features that you need to think about from a meeting standpoint. And then we look at cooperative content development, so wikis and images and media. So what, for instance, are you thinking about in terms of images and media? If you are a traditional workflow organization from an enterprise standpoint, and you have a Slack or a Microsoft or a Cisco, whatever the technology underlying platform may be, those are often not conducive to the kinds of things that you would find with the Adobe suite, and you may need to think about collaborative workflows there. So how, for instance, do you reconcile a feedback loop that includes markups on an image via Adobe Acrobat and comments in a Word document? You may also think about the Word document as an image, put that out as a PDF, and have comments on that coming back in, either through pen or people commenting. They're marking it up on their iPad, or they're typing in comments via Acrobat and putting those on there. So that gives you a sense of how complex even just reviewing a simple document is. It is not just we have a document and however you guys want to review it, let's review it. You've now potentially introduced a lot of complexity. So be very clear. We are reviewing the Word document. We are going to do it in Teams. We are going to use Microsoft Comments built into the Word application for tracking those comments. And that's how we're going to do it. If you have a discussion with somebody and says, "Oh, I'd like to mark it up with my iPad with a pen," have that conversation, but make sure it's open and explicit, and you're expecting it as the receiver of the feedback. And so you have to really think about all of those details when you go forward. And so if you don't have a set of specifications around what are you using for compound documents? How are you annotating things? How are you managing spreadsheets? How are you managing presentations? Do you have mind maps and ideation and those kinds of technologies as well? And how do those fit in? If you're using mind mapping, how do you take a mind map and then turn it into an Office document? What is that transition process? How do you get feedback on the mind map? How do you get feedback on the document that then it becomes? And then in content sharing, files, posts, blogs, images, and media. Where are you sharing those things internally? And I'm going to leave alone the entire conversation right now about the how do you do social media collaboration, because that's a whole separate piece for design, but it is an important one of the if I'm creating images, I'm creating content, I'm creating market messages, blogs, etc. How do I put those externally? Here I'm talking about how do we do that internally? How do we create internal blogs? Where do we share internal files? What is our file store? File stores, just like other collaboration technologies, which are now, by the way, just blurring because Dropbox and Box, for instance, have collaboration features within their suite, but some organizations have multiple places like that. They have an enterprise license with Microsoft, which gives them OneDrive. They have acquired Box licenses. They have Dropbox. They have people who are using free Dropbox still and then installing that on their enterprise systems and sharing documents that way. Again, it becomes a big mess because you end up with people doing multiple kinds of collaboration through multiple channels of collaboration, and nobody knows where to look for what. It gets very contextual. People learn that, when Dan is sharing a document, he's going to do it from, OneDrive, and that's where it's going to be shared, and it's going to be his personal OneDrive versus his business OneDrive, and you may find that out, but that's not how you should work. What you should do is say, we're using OneDrive as our shared file repository. Everything will be shared from there. That is not perhaps on Teams. If it's something you're doing that you're sharing that's not in a team, that's where it comes from. If it's in a team, it's shared via Teams. And then again, think about all of those subsequent waterfalls of events that happen when you don't follow those rules. Content management, version control, knowledge, learning objects, documents, images, and media. How do you think about where do you put the stuff, and not only where is it, but how do you manage version control? So some of the systems like OneDrive have built-in versioning. If I deleted it, if I've got an older version, I can go back and find some of those things. Increasingly, all of the shared file systems have that. Some don't. Especially if you're using older technology of, I still know companies that are using shared files in what, is Exchange folders and things like that. So you start losing technology, you start losing capabilities when you use older technologies. But you need to recognize that you need to have a place that you can put documents that is safe, secure, and allows you to backtrack and recover if you need to do that. And it's not just for Office documents, it's not just for presentations and spreadsheets and for Word and word processing documents. It's also for images and for media and for learning objects. So there's a lot of different file types that you have to think about. And then messaging. So, email, text, social, direct messages, chat, all of those things now exist across all of those collaboration environments. How do you communicate? How do you get a picture if you're a manager? How do I end up getting a picture of what's going on with my team? If I have people who are sending text messages to each other over their phones, if I have them sending emails without referencing everything that needs to be sent, everything involved in the conversation, doing social DM through things like Teams where they're, at mentioning somebody in a conversation thread, that's a separate conversation from the email. And if you're not mentioning all the people, then not everybody knows what's happening. They can, of course, go there, but there are still things that are going to be missing. And then there's public and private chats that are happening as well. So all of those places, again, not that they should be constrained that you say you can't use them, but you need to have the conversation about how you effectively use them and what you use them for and when and in what context. And then work management. How do you do process automation? What are the calendars that you use? So again, many of these systems have their own calendars. They can be linked, but they also have their own calendars. And how do you deal with calendar management? How do you help people get time back from managing appointments through things like AI and rules? Where's project management done? Is it done in a planner on Teams? Is it done in Trello that's being brought into Teams from the outside? How are you thinking about project management? Is it a traditional project where you're using something like a Microsoft project or other project management tool that is allowing you to do PERT networks and Gantt charts and tasks and assignments and all that kind of stuff? And how does that get visualized in a way that people know what's happening? And are you really managing to that? Are you planning it, or are you actually managing to it? And do you have a day-to-day place that people can go in and say, where is my work taking place? And then workflows. How are you managing the flow of information across the process? And then finally, the people directories, the profiles, the community management. Where are people? Who are people? What time zones are they in? How do you get them mentioned? What are the profiles and the metadata that you have to maintain? So I still see many organizations that have Active Directory, for instance, and it's both poorly articulated from a standpoint of hierarchy and very low population of metadata, so you don't really know what people's real titles are, who they work for, where they work, all kinds of things that would be very valuable to people that they could just rely on the system to look up, but it's not maintained. And so it therefore becomes less effective as a tool. And then finally, there's this bottom line of technologies across all of these: search, awareness, and state. Is somebody there? What is their availability? Is a document available, etc.? Analytics, discovery, and structure management. Those are all underlying all of these technologies. And again, that shows the complexity because every one of those falls into, in some way, every other technology. So if I'm thinking about managing Teams and Slack at the same time, I now have to think about managing the channels and who is a member of a channel in a duplicate, right, in parallel. I have to think about what are the structures and or not, right? If I don't think about it and I don't apply logic and design to the structures of the teams or to the Slack channels, then I end up having people in a place where they have to discover that for themselves. And I think that is a serious detriment to effective work. So use this as a guide for thinking about how you create the requirements for yourself. I'm not expecting that you're going to go out and do an RFQ and an RFP and say, let's go buy the right technology. But you already probably have the right technology. You probably have too much of the right technology, which then makes it the not right technology. Because you are making your employees, your contractors, and your partners make choices about how they work that they don't really need to make, that aren't necessarily things that are good or bad. It's just if you have the right place and you have a place that you do a particular piece of work, that's where it happens, and that's going to let them concentrate on the work rather than how the work gets done. Now, there are a bunch of questions that need to get answered as you go through this, and I'll reiterate those. So for employees, which tools for what? That's a question I should have answered. I'm on 3 different projects. What tools are we using for those projects? Where does my stuff go? When I save a document, where do I save it to so that my team members know where to find it? What if I need help with a tool? I don't understand how to use this piece of technology as well as I could. What are my resources? Do I have a person I can talk to? What if something breaks? Context. What am I working on? Right? And again, that goes back to the planning and or execution. I love using boards of a certain type Trellos or planners where I can see very visually in the right buckets what's going on, who's accountable for them, when the due dates are, and I can have very quick meetings of going through the things that are open questions because I already know what everybody else is doing. I know that they are keeping their content up to date so that anything that says it's due on this date and I haven't reached that date, or somebody changes a date, I can see that, and I know that's already happened. I can also see where the red flags are that we have to have the conversation about in the meeting about we've met some obstacle that we can't overcome and it's going to have this impact on the project. That's what meetings should be spent on, not people telling you what they've already done and or what they plan to do, because that should all be visible already. What you need to use the collective team intelligence on is how do we overcome obstacles so that we can keep working. And then processes. How do I communicate with my team? Again, there are so many ways, thinking about how do we make that simple and efficient? What is the best channel for private communication? Are there guidelines and policies for remote work? And I'm suggesting here that, several of these things could be turned into policies for your organization, and we'd be happy to help you to do that as well. How should we reconcile disagreements? When somebody has a conflict and needs a resolution, how does that? All right, now just something a little fun. Everybody's doing online conferences and they're thinking about how do I look good? I got to get dressed, and I've talked for years about the invention of a corporate dickie where you have a suit above you and you're wearing shorts. People are doing that now, right? You're wearing a button-down shirt and a tie and a sport coat and sweatpants while you're on these conference calls. And there is a little bit of a self-conscious issue with some of this, and some people really love that and seeing the face-to-face, and others don't. But also there's just a lot of fatigue about how do I have to continuously be involved in these meetings where I have to look presentable and pay attention and look like I'm intently, people in real meetings don't even look that intense usually. So I'm suggesting that you go back and you think about what calls can we actually have as just a plain old conference call? Do we need video? And there's some advantage of that, right? You can assert reassert what is important about the meeting and what the outcomes are, and get to the point and get back to work. And you don't have to worry about is my camera working and all those other details. You probably spend a lot less time fidgeting with your technology. You can eat and drink without embarrassment. Here, I'm going to take a drink of my soda. With the exception of the pause, there was no embarrassment. I wasn't looking like I was not paying attention because I put a straw in my mouth. You can't be Zoom bombed by your kid or wife or your pet or anybody else when you're doing an audio conference. And you still need, though, to understand how to manage yourself to insert your place into a conversation, but without looking stupid while you do so, right? So that's a skill that you need to learn as a remote worker. And you don't have to spruce yourself up and be camera ready. You can do other work, and if you're tuning out. And again, this is something that you need to really think about as a manager. Are all the people that are on this meeting really important to being in this meeting? Do they really need to be in this meeting right now, or should they be doing something else? Ask yourself that every single meeting. That is a primary design element of a meeting: is do people really need to be in it? And when you're on a conference call, flip your chair around, open your window, look out, play with your dog, do something, get comfortable and enjoy something other than just what's happening in the meeting, which probably makes you pay attention to the meeting a little bit better. And you don't have to sit at your computer to participate. It is, you can walk around your house, you can do all kinds of other things when you're in a conference call and not on video. Plus, you don't end up with if you're on video and doing some of that other stuff with the camera making people seasick and or showing things that you don't want to see, which I've heard many anecdotes about video conference calls where people are not aware of where their camera is pointed at any point in time. Doesn't happen with a conference call. You may hear a flush in the background, but that's about as bad as it's going to get. And you can concentrate better on what's being said, right? You're not worrying about the visual element, you're worrying about the auditory element. You're perhaps sharing a screen, but you're not on you're not on really. I mean, if you think about it in entertainment terms, you're not on. And so you can spend time listening and having a good conversation without worrying about the visual aspects. So, very briefly, first of all, thank you for listening to that. Very briefly, I want to just introduce you to the collaboration coaching that we do with Serious Insights, with tool selection, information architecture, practice facilitation and documentation, virtual conflict resolution design, and incentive and KPI facilitation. So all those things that I suggested that you need to think about, we're happy to help coach you on that. And you can go to seriousinsights.net/contact to reach out to us. And you can also schedule a time directly with me via my AI assistant at x.ai/calendar/DanielWRasmus/virtual. So please take the time to do that, and we'll put the links up on the video as well. And then finally, we've done some free research that is available on remote work in the COVID-19 repository. And then there's a lot of deeper research at research/collaboration, seriousinsights.net/research/collaboration. So look at those places for additional information. And then we're going to continue to do these videos. You to think about. If you have questions, feel free to post them. Knowledge management, distribution, and lost connections, I think, is a preview that as we look at laid off and furloughed workers, we're going to start finding knowledge gaps, either as we restart or as we continue to work remotely. In either case, the organizations are going to lose critical knowledge, and every organization needs to start addressing that right now. What do we need to know to go forward? And many of the things that we thought we knew may change in the future, but let's capture what we do know about how we work and our products and our quality and our customers and all the other stuff that we're going to lose touch with because we're going to lose mass of the brain power of the organization if we have a smaller workforce over time. And so let's start thinking about that right now and think about how we create incentives for people sharing their knowledge and ways of connecting with people that give them payment, for instance, for doing things even as they are departing from an organization, that you pay them for sharing what they know or putting them on retainer to make them available at some point in the future. So those are all considerations, and we'll talk about that in much more depth in the future. And I really appreciate your time and look forward to continuing to have these conversations with you as we go through this crisis. I want you to all stay safe and feel free to reach out to us for your questions about this webinar and or for any of your collaboration and knowledge management needs going forward. Thank you very much.